Hi there, and welcome to One Idea Away, not just a podcast, but a community and ongoing conversation meant to inspire and empower individuals to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. Let's jump into today's episode right now. You know, what you certainly hear here on One Idea Away is a great number of stories, and stories hold just so much power and so much emotion for us. They can liberate us, or they can keep us in the dark for decades. There are stories of triumph as well as stories of defeat, of celebration as well as of shame, and there's a whole lot more in the in-between gray areas. Well, today we're going to hear about some of those stories and insights on living from the very unique view of a hospice chaplain. Our guest today is Kerry Egan. She's a Harvard Divinity School-educated hospice chaplain and author of the book On Living. It's a book about how we give meaning to our lives. She's a former writer in residence at the Aspen Institute's Aspen Words program, and Egan has been featured on PBS News Hour and CNN's Morning Edition. Her essays have appeared in the New York Times, CNN.com, The Washington Post, Oprah.com, Woman's Day, Parents, and Reader's Digest, among many others. In addition to On Living, Egan is the author of Fumbling, A Journey of Love, Adventure, and Renewal on the Camino de Santiago, which was a Barnes & Noble Discover Great New Writers pick. And with that, Kerry, thank you so much for joining us here on One Idea Away.
Thank you for having me.
And Kerry, I think it's one of the questions that you framed as a common conversation for you to have very early on in the book, and I figured we would start with it. What exactly does a chaplain do?
So, a hospice chaplain is part of the hospice team. And hospice is a service for people who have a diagnosis, a life-limiting diagnosis, meaning they probably, if the disease maintains a regular course, they will die in about 6 months or less. So these are people at the end of life, people who know that they're dying. And the hospice team comes in. It's usually a nurse, a social worker, a chaplain, volunteers, an aide. And we come in to help the person stay at home as opposed to dying in hospital and to live as full and rich a life as they can in whatever time they have left. We're there to support the patient and also to support the family. When hospice, really more than anything, hospice is not only about or not really about the medical treatment of a disease. It's about living. It's about how do we live even when we know life is coming to an end, and what are the things we can do to make life as full and rich as it can be, even if we have a diagnosis that means we know we'll be leaving this world soon. So I'm part of that team, and it's always important to understand that a hospice chaplain is part of a team, right? It doesn't make sense if you're not in that team. And so my job as part of the team is to offer spiritual support for patients and families. So when you're looking at the end of your life, you know it's coming to an end. We don't really know what comes next. We have our beliefs. Everybody has beliefs, but does anybody really know? Not really. And so those questions come up, what comes next? But more so, the questions come up of what did this life mean, right? What was this all about? I just spent, maybe I spent 90 years here on this earth, and what was that all about? Or maybe I spent, 27 years on this earth, and I'm leaving before I want to leave. And what is that all about? And so these big spiritual questions of what does this life mean, right? What was the point of this all of joy and of love and of happiness and of sorrow and loss and trauma and heartbreak? I mean, all of that happens in a life. Like, what was the meaning? What was the point of it? Those are hard questions. And those are the questions people at the end of life are really faced with. I mean, they're questions for you and me who don't have a terminal diagnosis. But when your time is limited, those questions really tend to come to the forefront. So as a hospice chaplain, that's my job, is to help people who are struggling with those questions and to figure out what tools do they have to help them come to terms with those questions. And for some people, for many people even, one of the biggest tools they have is their religious faith. But it's certainly not the only tool people have when they're doing this spiritual work, this meaning making. So that's what chaplain does.
So let me, I guess also then ask you this is, I'm curious what it was that ultimately prompted you to write this book, as well as share your own story within the many stories that you share of some of the people that you've gotten to know through the years.
So what prompted me to write the book is that I made a promise to a patient in the very beginning of the book. I start with that story. There was a patient who felt that she had come to the end of her life. And she said, you always hear, when you get old, you get real wise. And she said, and here I am, I'm dying, and I didn't get wise. She's like, I'm still the same person. I haven't figured it all out. And she said, but I've learned so much. I've learned from all, and she had been through a lot. This is a woman who had been through a lot in her life. But, we've all been through a lot. I always want to say to people, who say, well, is there anybody who, just nothing really happened in their life? And honestly, the answer is no. Like nobody has ever said to me as a hospice chaplain, nothing really happened to me. Nobody's ever said that. Nobody's ever had nothing to talk about. So this woman had been through a lot, but we all go through a lot. But she'd been through a lot, and she said, I wish with all that I've been through and all that I've learned, and it's so late, it's so late for me. I'm dying now, and I wish I could tell other people, right? I wish I could tell other people my stories. I wish I could tell other people what I've been through and what I learned, and maybe they could learn something from it. Maybe they could learn something sooner than I learned it, because I struggled and I suffered a lot. And maybe if other people knew my story, maybe it'd be easier for them if I could share my story. And this was so important to her to share her story. And it took me a long time before I finally said to her, hey, did I ever tell you I was a writer as well as a chaplain? And she didn't believe me at first. She looked at me. She was like, you? And I said, yeah, me. That was really hard for her to believe for some reason. And then she said, well, then you need to tell my stories. And so I made a promise. I made a promise that I would share her stories in some way. And that was years ago. And I didn't really know how to do that. I didn't, for a while, I wasn't sure, was I going to write an essay about it? How was I going to do that? And I wrote a book. My hope in the book, I tell a lot of people's stories. I tell her story, and I tell stories about things that I've been through, the difficult things that I've been through, right? Because we've all been through difficult things. And my hope is that in reading those stories, the person who's reading it can say, this is similar to my life, and I understand the meaning this person made. Or they can say, oh my gosh, that's totally wrong. That's not at all the meaning I would have made, right? That's not how I would make sense of this. Because that's really what it comes down to. You learn as a chaplain that the meaning-making work each of us does has to come from within your soul, right? That this work that you do, I believe in God, so I believe that this work happens between the person and the Holy Spirit. Not everybody does believe in God. But whether or not you believe in God, it remains true that the work is intensely personal. It's between you, and it's either between you and yourself or you and the Holy Spirit, right? Nobody else can do this meaning-making work for you. Nobody else can tell you what your life means. Like I said, faith traditions can offer guideposts, they can offer the stories of people who have come before you. They can offer great wisdom, but ultimately you're doing this work on your own. So my hope is people will read this book and they'll read other people's stories and they'll read my stories, and they'll either say, yeah, that's helpful. That's a helpful way to think about this. Or they'll say, oh my gosh, she's so wrong. Here's how I make sense of it. But that in either way, they'll be encouraged to do the work themselves for their own lives. Because you don't have to wait until you're dying to do this. It's easy for all of us if you do it as you're living. But
exactly.
we get so busy, we just don't.
Yeah.
So,
well, either way, in either reaction, whether they agree or disagree, it gets them to reflect on living, on where they're at, where their meaning is, and which way they would ultimately take it. There's kind of two different directions that I want to ask you about today. One being a little bit about the sort of the way in which you work as a chaplain in terms of the way that you communicate and the presence that you have. We'll talk about that first. And then second, some of the insights that some of which I think are pretty profound that you walked away with from all of these experiences and stories as well. One of the things that you describe in terms of your role as a chaplain, which I thought was really fascinating, was this idea that the power of what you do as a chaplain lies in the powerlessness that you have, meaning that, you're not the nurse, you're not the doctor, you're not there to prescribe drugs, you can't prescribe a program, you can't get them the transplant, you can't do any of those things. but yet you have such this extraordinarily powerful relationship at times with those that you get to take care of as part of this time. And so I was wondering if you could just speak a little bit about why that powerlessness, as it were, of position is actually a source of power for the relationship that a patient and their chaplain may have.
And I think it goes further than just the chaplain-patient relationship. I think sometimes that powerlessness can be a source of power in other areas of people's lives. I think that's important for people to realize. Like, so many times we feel powerless, and to realize that sometimes it's in the powerlessness, actually, and sort of re-understanding, reframing it, that you realize, oh my gosh, there's great power here in not being part of sort of the powerful structure. When I go in to see a patient, as a chaplain, there's nothing I can give them. Right? I can't give them drugs or medication like a nurse can or a doctor can. I can't give them, like the social worker can come in and talk about different programs. I don't do that. I can't give them programs to sign up for. And I don't take anything from a patient, right? I don't take blood. I don't take urine. I don't take, their next of kin information. I don't take forms. I don't give anything, and I don't take anything. I have no power really in sort of the medical model of how we treat death and dying. And that's exactly why the chaplain is so powerful, is that we have no power in the medical model. And so you can just duck out of it, right? You can just say, I have no power in this model. This is not where I'm called. This is not where I am. And so I need to find a different way. And for most people who are dying, once their symptoms are controlled and contained, they don't see it as a medical event for themselves. Right? The medical system might see it as a medical event, but the patient does not, and the family does not, right? They see this as, this is a relational event. This is about your relationship to your family, your relationship to your body, your relationship to the world. And that relationship is undergoing a drastic change. And so as a chaplain, when you can step out of the medical model, again, I have no power there. I have nothing to give, nothing to take. I'm in a different place. I can relate to the patient and the family, and they can relate to me outside of that one way of seeing the world. And when you're able to step out of that one way of seeing the world, the whole world opens up. Right? The world explodes open, and suddenly you are free to see your life and your death and your body and your family and this created world. You are suddenly free to see it the way you need to see it, the way your heart calls you to see it, not the way this particular model demands you see it. And so that's the power of being a chaplain, is I sit with that person very often in a hospital or in a nursing home, or even if they are at home, sort of surrounded by medical gear oftentimes. They're in a hospital bed, and they've got a permanent port in their neck to put IV lines into, and they've got medications, and they've got catheters, and who knows what sort of medical intervention type stuff they have to make them comfortable. Right? In hospice, we're trying to get you to be as comfortable as you can be, so you can live your life. But to not be in that gives people, it's almost like they get a chance to take a deep breath and remember, oh, who am I really? Who am I? And that's where that power comes from. When you have no power within a certain system, then you're free to just not be part of that system. And then the whole world opens up. And I think that's true not just for a medical model, but for so many other models we have in our lives that we find ourselves in. Absolutely.
Well, and I'm glad that's the way that you began, and even how you come full circle with it, because I think it's part of what I was hoping people would extract from this as well, is that when you come at things where you're powerless within one model, or another way of saying it is that you don't really have a specific agenda other than just to be with the person that's in front of you, it opens up a completely different space. And it puts you in this wonderful place where you can explore and you can investigate and you can question and you can converse and dialogue. And it's not about, I'm not trying to convince you of something. I'm not trying to talk you into anything. I can't offer you anything.
Right. I'm not here to take anything. I'm not here to give anything. I'm not here to convince you of anything. As a chaplain, I'm just going to sit with you, and we're going to ask, what do you need right now? And if, sometimes, we joke around that, sometimes people will get mad at the chaplain and let's say, get out of here, and they'll be angry. And then you have to take a step back and say, maybe they really needed that today. Maybe they really needed, they're feeling powerlessness, stuck in this bed. Maybe they really needed to be able to control their environment for a second. And they didn't want to see you, and they told you to get out, and they had that sense of, control. And maybe that in and of itself was the good thing you did today.
Sure.
To just be with someone where they are, to want nothing of them, to want to give them nothing. That doesn't happen very often in our lives.
Yeah. Well, so you describe this in this because this is something I talk about in some of the retreats that I've led, because I see it as one of the greatest gifts that we can give to somebody. You describe it as giving someone or offering someone your presence. I was wondering if you could just say a little bit more about what does it mean to offer someone your presence?
Yeah, and that's not my word. That's a real chaplaincy word. That's like a classic word in the discipline of chaplaincy, health chaplaincy. And so your presence with someone, when you are present with someone, it means that you bring all of yourself, right? You bring your full self to them. You bring your feelings, your history, your intellect, your knowledge, your skill, your training. You bring it all with you, and then you're present with them, right? Yeah. You're simply there. You are there to be open to them, to who they are. You're bringing your whole self, but your whole self is focused on this one person, right? Again, it comes back to this idea of the powerlessness, right? It's the powerlessness that lets you be present, because you don't need to be thinking about, I have to get these forms signed, or, is he really, this is a big thing, is he really telling the truth? Is he really sticking to his diet? The nurse and the social worker, they have to be skeptical by nature.
Right.
Right? Are you really taking your medication? Chaplain doesn't have to. Whatever you say right now, I'm going to believe you, because that's what I'm here to be. I'm here to be present to who you are in this moment. I'm not here to get anything from you. I'm just here to be with you. And that sounds really easy, right? That sounds like, be with someone. It's so hard, right? Because our natural tendency is that we tend to want to talk about ourselves. Yeah. We tend to want to think about ourselves. We tend to want to think about our families. We tend to want to fix things. This is a really, really big thing, right? When we're with someone who is in pain or someone who is struggling, for many of us, the tendency is to want to fix this. And that's not being present, right? When you are trying to fix something for someone, even if it's coming from the best part of your heart, you want to fix this for someone, it's coming from a place of love, it's still not being present. Being present is that you are sitting with someone in all, your whole self is sitting with someone with their whole self, and you are accepting of it. You're not trying to fix it. You're not trying to change it. You are not trying to, again, take or give anything. You are just being present. And the difficulty of this, it's hard to overstate how hard this is. It's very active, right? It looks very simple and plain. It looks like you're just sitting there, but in fact, it is an incredibly active approach to being with someone, to be present with someone, because you're constantly having to remind yourself, I'm not here to fix this, or another big thing, this is not my mother, right? Yeah. This is not my friend. You might love your patients very much, but they're not your family and they're not your friends. And it's important to remember that you are the chaplain and it's a particular role.
So much of what we do from week to week on One Idea Away are explore different ideas and insights and stories that I can tell you have personally and professionally affected my own life, my own career. I also know that these are the ideas and the insights that have affected many others, people that I've worked with, from actual direct clients of mine to coaches that I know that are out there that are doing this work, to obviously the work and the stories that so many of our experts and guests share right here on the show. And so we've begun some new things new developments inside of the One Idea Away community. And you might be missing out on some of these added reflections and insights that we've been doing, as well as some of the deeper conversations we're getting into. So if you are not presently receiving our email messages, or if you're not part of our private Facebook group conversations, then I'm going to ask you to get involved so that you're not missing out on some of the weekly momentum building reflections and questions that we keep throwing out, some of the inspiration and encouragement of the community, because there's really nothing like having somebody in your corner while you're trying to make some of these types of changes. We've even begun some regular live streaming so that we can go deeper into these topics. Just go over to oneideaaway.com/join to get involved. Now, don't worry, it's free. Just jump on in at oneideaaway.com/join. It's part of our mission at One Idea Way to take these insights, the wisdom that's gained, and begin to use them so that we can springboard to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. As I said, these are the ideas and insights that have changed my own lives and the lives of so many more. And if you want to know how exactly, if you want to know how you can begin to tap into some of these ideas and make those shifts within your life, well, do me a favor, just go over to oneideaaway.com/join, get on the email, stop in the side of the community, and please come ask me. I would love to have that conversation with you, as well as get you involved to make whatever changes, whatever shifts in your life you're looking to make. Because at the end of the day, it just takes one idea for us to really start to uncover what this life can be all about for us. Thanks for dropping in, and enjoy the rest of the episode. Well, a couple of things I want to point out there, because it's really interesting to me, this idea of being with someone in this way, and exactly as you said, it's something that's really, really active. The example that I'd give to everybody is, just think about when you are really, truly trying to listen to somebody in a conversation, and you know that when you try to listen, think about how many thoughts start crossing your mind, judgments, and you want to fix this, and you're associating it to that, and here's a great story I can tell about me that I'm reminded of, right? And so actively being with somebody and being present with them means that you don't follow all of those distractions. You don't follow all the mind chatter. You don't listen to all of those judgments. And instead, you just leave them aside and you stay with the person that's in front of you and the conversation that's in front of you. Right. It takes a lot of active nature to be that mindful, to be with that person in that type of capacity.
And sometimes people will say, and that's why I brought up, that you bring your full self. People will say, well, you just kind of shut down that part. And I'm like, no, you don't shut anything down. That's what makes it hard. You have to bring your whole self and learn to be present with the other person, right? If you shut yourself out and you're just kind of sitting there mindlessly, that's not being present either, right? Mm-mm. That's what makes it so hard. You have to bring your full self, and you have to focus completely on this other person and accept them. It's really about acceptance. Accept them as they are. When someone starts hysterically crying, there's two ways to be with that person, or there's probably more than one. It's probably more than two. You can be present with them, and not flinch and not move away and not draw back, but just let them cry it out. I mean, eventually everyone will stop crying. Or, you can try to fix it, try to distract them. What's wrong? That's not being present, right? Distraction is the opposite of presence. Being present is just being present to where they are at that moment, and having a lot of faith that they will have the ability to come back to their own center. If you show them what it's like to remain centered, to remain there, to remain present, they'll be able to become present as well.
That idea of to be able to accept them as they are is such a profound one, because it's so much of what we don't feel within other areas of our lives. And so I appreciate, and this is why I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the role in which you play and the way in which you have this role as a chaplain, because there's so much for us all to learn from that. Think about being fully present for those people that are in your lives that you care very much about, being fully present for somebody who maybe you might even be having a challenge with right now. And when you are fully present in that way, when you accept them as they are, when you try not to fix things, when you're not judging them, think about what space that could open up. Even just what a brand new, maybe a slight little window of possibility that could open up just within that space. So there's a lot there for us to take away. I do want to pivot a little bit just to some of the insights also that you've gained through all of these stories as well, because there's many of them. So I'll just narrow it down to a few. one of the things which there's kind of a couple that are connected here. So one of the things which I thought was really interesting, and you described yourself also as, I think, a story holder as part of your role as a chaplain, which I thought was a wonderful way to put it. And that very often that at that late stage of life that you find people in through hospice is that you realize or find for them that they've been holding on to what they would consider shameful secrets. And that holding on to shameful secrets, you put it as, we don't realize that we're actually strengthening that system of shame. Mm-hmm. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you have found in the way in which these stories of shame rise, but also in what you experience as they get released as well.
I think one of the most important things I've learned is that when people feel ashamed, they feel that they've done, shame to me means that this person feels that there is some part of them that is unlovable, right? That there is some part of them so terrible, so shameful that they must keep it secret because otherwise it renders them unlovable. And that sometimes when people keep these secrets of the things that they're ashamed of, they're trying oftentimes to be loving, right? So if I had this secret, this something I'm so ashamed of, and I keep it secret from my family, very often that's because I'm trying to protect my family. I love my family, and I'm trying to protect them from the shame that I believe makes me unlovable, and that might make them unlovable if they were to know about it or to participate in it. I think so often when there are family secrets, it can cause, when the secret comes out, it doesn't always, but it can cause anger and a sense of betrayal and such a sense of sadness and confusion. And I think it's always helpful to hold on to that very key piece of it, that very often this shame, what's seen as this shameful secret, it was kept a secret out of love. Yeah. I think that's really important. Yeah. And not always obvious. Yeah. But the fact is that when people feel shame and they think that there's something deeply unlovable about them that they need to keep secret or they need to protect the people they love from, they're just reinforcing that system of shame. They're reinforcing the idea that I am unlovable, right? They're reinforcing it. So they're not protecting the people they love from the shame. They're actually making the shame stronger. They're teaching the people they love that, yes, there are parts of you that are unlovable. Yeah. Or there are things that can happen to you that will render you unlovable. And I don't think that's the message anyone wants to give their children, certainly. Exactly. And yet at the same time, I can also say, I think we need to learn to be comfortable with the idea that there are going to be things about each other we don't know, right? That there's always going to be things we don't know about each other.
And I think, just connecting these, these couple of things we've been talking about, because that idea, the more and more in which we're present with somebody, meaning again that we accept them as they are, we put, we don't focus on the things of the judgments and associations or trying to fix them. The more that we're present, the more that individuals will feel accepted, they'll feel more loved, and they will begin to question, wait, maybe I don't have to hold as much of this back. Maybe I can allow a little bit more of this to be seen. Right. And if you're not yet comfortable in sharing it yourself, give the acceptance to someone else and see how they open up. And maybe that'll provide you the courage, right?
I think sometimes with, my experiences with patients, in hospice, but I think this happens at other times, even, I think it happens in the course of friendships. I think it happens in the course of families. Sometimes I think it's almost like we test the water a little bit, like we stick our toe in to see, well, what if I talk about this? And I know I do this all the time. We all do this all the time. And we look to see, what is the reaction going to be of the person we're with? Are they going to draw back? Are they going to flinch, right? Are they going to draw back in disgust or in horror? Or are they going to be present and simply listen to what happened to us in a non-judgmental way? So, sometimes it's sort of these big stories at the end of life. Sometimes it's these big shameful secrets, but sometimes it's little things. Sometimes it's little things in the course of a day that we're testing to see what is the reaction of the people we love.
And one of those other big things that you also got into because you had a really unique, I think, perspective on this was, for everybody, one of the big topics when you're facing death in this type of capacity is that idea of regrets. What is it that we regret? And, for Kerry, you described it as that regret can actually be something that can actually be positive, meaning that it's something that can be used as a vehicle to hope. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit more about that.
Well, I think when you look at what your regrets are, and that's not easy. I say that like flippantly, like sit down and look at your regrets. That's going to be hard, right? That's going to be that might be very emotionally difficult, painful. But if you do it, if you can look at it, what is it you regret? Then what you're looking at is what you wish was different, right? If you regret not, you regret not spending more time with your kids. Well, what you're really saying is, I wish that was different. I wish I had spent more time with my kids. Yeah. Well, now you know what's important to you, right? We don't regret things that aren't important, right? If we look at our regrets and we decide what we regret, we're looking at what was important to me? And while you're still alive, even if you're dying, you're still alive. You still have the opportunity to address those regrets, right? You still have the opportunity now to look at, okay, this is what's important to me. This is what's important. How can I do more of what's important to me, right? The flip side of regret is hope. Like, I regret X, Y, and Z. So the flip side of that is I hope for A, B, and C. Yeah. Right. So if we can look at what our regrets are, we can discover what our hope is. And I'm not saying, again, I talk about it as though this was easy, and it's not easy, right? I mean, I think if you read the book, you'll see that for people, myself included, this is not easy work necessarily. But if we can do it, especially if we can do it, with someone we trust and someone we love, someone who is present with us, it somehow makes it easier. We can look at what we regret and we can say, okay, what do I change? What do I change? Yeah. What can I change? What am I hoping for? So, the flip side of regret is hope always.
I think it's a wonderful way of being able to take a look at it, and also to provide everybody that encouragement of exactly as you say. It's not an easy thing to sit down and look at your regrets, but if you do it now, as opposed to what I hope is many decades from now for all of you, it gives you that chance to say, wait a minute, this is what I hope to be different in my life. What can I do about it right now? Let me change things.
I think one of the most exciting things about working in hospice for me personally, was the realization that, these are people with, months left, weeks left, and are doing this work and are still able to change, right? On the one hand, you can say, well, a leopard changes its spots, never changes its spots. And that's kind of true. I feel like in some ways, we are who we are. Yet at the same time, I've seen change. I've seen people change. I know the work that goes into change, right? Mm-hmm. I know the work that goes into acknowledging your regrets and your hopes and moving towards it. But it's really encouraging to see that people can change, right? That they can become who they want to be. Right? Even at the very end, we never run out of time to be who we want to be until we die, really. Yeah. That's really encouraging, that you can, I'm 45 now, right? And there are times I'm like, oh, my life is half over. Well, yeah, it's only half over.
Exactly.
Hopefully only half over. It's not too late. It's never too late. That's really encouraging to see that.
So one of the you brought up this question of who am I really a little bit earlier, and there was something else that you had said, that there is this desire that people have to be seen and to be known, to be accepted for who they really are. And as you're talking about some of this in the book, you raised a key question of who do you believe yourself to be? Mm-hmm. And so I actually want to kind of turn that back on you for a moment of who do you believe yourself to be? How would you answer that today based on all of the experiences that you've had?
I believe I am very strong. I believe I'm very loving. I believe that even though I doubt myself, I doubt myself often, I can look back at what I've experienced and say, you know what? It's okay to doubt yourself. That's okay. It's okay to doubt yourself. And sometimes it's even okay to indulge those doubts for, a couple days or a couple weeks. But ultimately, I'm stronger than those doubts. Yeah. I believe I am a capable person. I believe we're all capable, actually. I believe it's not just about me. I believe it about everybody I meet. That we are very lucky to be in this created world for a little while. And really, to me, the most remarkable thing about being in the world and in this body is not just that we get to experience the created world, which is sometimes very wonderful and sometimes very horrible, but that we get to create. And I think that's really important. And I think it's not something we think about or talk about very much. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are in creation, but we are not passive in creation. We get to create. We get to create something every day, even if it's, even if it's a cup of coffee. You just created a cup of coffee, You just created something. And we're not aware that we're creating all day long. And I wish we were more aware and more thoughtful about what we are creating. So I believe that I am very loving. I try to be very loving. I believe I am loving. I believe I am strong. And I know that I can create things in this world and that I can choose what I create. That's what I believe.
Kerry, I want to thank you for coming on One Idea Way and sharing all your insights, your experiences, your wisdom, your work with us.
Thank you for having me.
For everyone, Kerry just summed it up in many ways very, very beautifully. And I guess maybe some of the takeaways that I would leave you with is that idea that we are always creating, and we're creating just this moment, this very next moment that we're in. You have the choice that whatever's happened up until now, that's fine. It is what it is. What will you choose to create now? And when we get really present with ourselves, really present with others, when we're becoming very accepting of others and a little bit, tiny bit more accepting of ourselves, even at times, the things that we can create are just absolutely extraordinary. And they just open so many beautiful things up within this life. So I want to thank you once again for dropping in on One Idea Way. And until next time, as always, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.